It is 2022 and the Eldritch Lorecast is back. And this episode we're talking about all of Ghostfire Gaming's plans in 2022 and our personal goals about the future. All that and more coming up right now. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the first episode of 2022. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like we made it, hopefully. Cross fingers. We're here. It's a new year. It's a new world. It's an exciting time. And I am here, as always, joined by Dael Kingsmill, James Hake, Shawn Merwin. Shawn, we made it to 2022. What is something that you are most thankful for from 2021?
Just that we made it. And I got this exciting new job at Ghostfire Gaming, which allowed me to meet all of you wonderful people who I get to speak with every day.
Oh, I was going to say I got a new car, but you're so nice.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I don't know how to drive. But Dael Kingsmill, A, do you know how to drive? And B, what are you thankful for from 2021?
I do know how to drive, and I just bought myself a new car. I say new car. Used car.
Right. A new used car.
A new used car. A car that I bought recently. It's new to me. That's what's new. This is gonna seem very planned, but I did not know that this was gonna be the question. But I'm thankful for at the sort of beginning of 2021, I had dinner with a couple of friends of mine, and one of them said, what's one goal that you would like to achieve this year? And I said, I would like to finally get some merch out for my YouTube channel, and I'm wearing it right now. So it looks really planned. It looks really planned. But I'm real proud that I finally got that happening. It's out there. Thank you, 2021.
Thank you, 2021. Well done. James Hake, your 2021 thankful thing. That was a weird sentence.
My gosh. I'm thankful that Shawn took what I was about to say. And I get to think of something else in addition to it. 2021 has been kind of a turbulent year for me, both personally and just kind of going full tilt professionally also. So I guess more than anything, I'm thankful that I came out so well on the other side of it. 2022 is going to be shaping up to be a truly incredible year. And I'm thankful that 2021 was the runway that put me there.
Shawn and James have both said nice things. Can I change my answer to something that's not capitalism?
You can if you want to, because I was going to say a nice thing as well, but go ahead, Dael. All right, Dael, second chance.
For my community. It's not a lie.
Who will buy my merch?
I just... It's such a terrible answer. I hit 100,000 subscribers in 2021. So really in that, my community, I'm really thankful for them and reaching new milestones together. There we go. That's a bit better than capitalism.
No, look,
now I want merch. I'm going to make Shawn Merwin branded shot glasses for everyone.
Do it.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. That sounds excellent. Yes, much like the three of you, I am very grateful that we have started this podcast in 2021, that I get to chat with the three of you each and every week, or most weeks if other people are on. 2021 was the birth of the Eldritch Lorecast. 2022, there are so many exciting things ahead. And we'll just quickly kind of semi-rapid fire. Actually, before I get to that, I was just about to rapid fire down a couple of things that are happening with Ghostfire in 2022. But the biggest news, Fables 1 Episode 1 is out. Citadel of the Unseen Sun. The first chapter is available for those who are subscribed.
Yeah.
James Hake, how do you feel?
Overwhelmed. It's truly impossible to describe how cool it is for a brand new story to begin. What can I say that I haven't dreamed already? For those of you who are here now, there has already been a preview of Fable 1. So Episode 1, Chapter 1, you may have already seen it. But now the full first episode is out there in the world. The first episode is one that I had planned to create entirely myself. And the first chapter was something that I'd written personally, but episode 1, I think, is kind of the story of hitting the ground running here at Ghostfire, because I was not prepared for the amount of managerial, administrative tasks I would be taking on. It was transforming from a freelance writer to being a guy who coordinates a full adventure's creation. And so I reached out to a really, really good friend of mine, HTT Paladin, one of the minds behind the islands of Sina Una, to do the rest of this episode. And so he and I kind of chatted back and forth. And so much of what's in that episode was kind of like scribbled ideas that I had put down and kept saying, well, I'll get to this. I'll once I've edited someone else's episode, I'll get to this. But ultimately had to hand off to someone else. So it's very cool to see something that's like, is still my baby in its own way, but also has been so influenced by the creativity and the, honestly, ingenuity of another amazing writer suddenly come to fruition. I mean, it's just like how a D&D campaign works, right? It's that sort of bringing together of all of the ideas, all of the minds, all of the creativity into one place, and then some alchemy happens when all of those things are brought together.
It's such a trustful, isn't it? When you're the kind of person who's just like, I want to make this thing and I'm going to make it happen and these are all my ideas for it. You lay it all out, and then the moment that you realize that you're going to have to let some of that control go and hand some of that over to someone else, but then you find out most of the time that actually that combining of creative energies creates something even bigger than you ever could have done yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's the job, right? Like, I'm learning increasingly through talking with Suzanne Helmig, who's our art director, or one of the art directors for Ghostfire Gaming, that a lot of her job is really just coordinating the artwork for the different projects. And is it Ona Christensen that did the art directing for Fables?
No, it's Zoe Robinson.
Zoe.
I've worked hand in hand with her, truly. She's just my closest confidant when it comes to Fables. She's done incredible work.
I mean, are you both going through that similar experience of, like, you might touch different parts of the overall project and make sure that it's all coming together in a singular vision, if you will, but it is a lot of, like, it's less personal writing every detail and more managing those details and those different art pieces, different chapters, different, sections coming together to form a creative whole?
It's an incredible balancing act of creating something that is consistent throughout, but while doing so, not eliminating the unique voice that each writer brings to the table. Of course, one of the aspects of hiring a freelance writer, or a freelance artist for that matter, speaking of Zoe's job, is, we have an idea that we would like them to execute. So here's the brief, bring it to life. But we didn't hire these creative people so they could be automata. We hired them because they have a certain spark to them. There's something that they love. I think of this most clearly when I think of our writer for episode 3 of Fable 1, The Mask of Life, which Willie Abiel did. And if you know Willie through their work through MCDM or anything like that, you know that they have a sort of propensity for clownishness. And episode 3 deals strongly in this grand sort of Venetian carnival of undeath that has this sort of grim but decadent and silly but also grotesque sort of circus of contradictions to it. And it's my belief that darkness and horror are only elevated by moments of mirth and levity. And it's a very, very tough thing to balance. It's the sort of thing that a DM has to season to taste once they have the adventure in their hands. But when you put both of those elements together and you get someone who really loves doing one thing or another, you have to be very, very careful not to accidentally round off all the corners. Because the sharp edges that are really, really delightful. It's where the personality comes from.
Are you experiencing something similar, Shawn? You've got the Monster Grimoire coming out in 2022. Q1, I believe, is when it's meant to reach backers and go on sale on the Ghostfire Gaming store.
Yeah, we're on that trajectory. We are in final layout and proofing, so I think we are safely in the realm. But in terms of similarities and differences to what James just described, I've done similar things to what he did with Fables, only not in terms of getting the art and the scope of it, but like dealing with freelancers doing adventures. The Monster Grimoire was a whole different monster. Excuse the really horrible pun. Because when you come out with 400 plus monsters all in one book, you are dealing with a cast of thousands in terms of writers, playtesters, artists. I had Suzanne working with me on the art, so her expertise served me very well in getting everything in the correct form, getting it the right size, getting it to fit on the page. With Martin, our layout person, also doing a tremendous job. But in terms of that, wanting to do everything, I was in that mode as well. I thought, I have a vision for this. I'm going to make sure I oversee it. And while I have read every word in the book, there's no way I could have gotten all the freelancers together, edited all their stuff, developed and designed all their stuff. So I had to reach out in many different directions for many different parts of the project. We had close to 40 people contributing monsters to the book right from the start, including some brand new 5e designers. I had people from my class that I taught with monsters that they did for homework.
No way.
Get those
What?
into the book.
That makes me so
absolutely.
happy.
And those were some of the most unique monsters because these are all people who may have just been introduced to 5e D&D. And so after a couple of classes where we went over how to design them, where to put all the relevant game mechanical parts, people began turning in their work. And the monsters like the Potbelly, which is a giant, but his stomach is exposed and he grabs you and shoves you in.
We were talking about this in the office the other day, and this doesn't have to have a definitive answer, Shawn, if you don't want to give it one, because I really love the Potbelly. I love this idea. I mean, it's horrific but hilarious at the same time, right, where it picks up a person, dumps it into the acids and juices and things that are inside of its belly, and pulls it out like a Kentucky Fried person, and then just starts like munching down on it. But there was a debate in the office whether the Potbelly even needs to pull you out and eat you, or whether it just dunks you in there and digests you like through the process of having you in its belly. Is there a confirmation either way you can go on that? Settle a bet in the office?
It really depends on how peckish the giant is at the time. It could definitely digest you straight from its stomach, but if you need to get that satisfaction of deep fried paladin, then there's nothing better than just pulling it out and having a bite or two. But it's those kinds of new ideas and things that, if you've been designing monsters for all of 5e's life or further back in RPG history, you sort of you can get into a rut. So having those new fresh ideas come in is so wonderful, and that's what we got in this book, is a wide variety of monster types.
Yeah, I'm so super excited to start to use some of these monsters in the games of D&D that I'm running. Just because, I've mentioned on the podcast before, the first thing I often do when I want to design a new adventure or something is be like, what's the monster? Like, what is the thing at the end of the dungeon that they have to go fight and kill? And that will inform, what the lair looks like and what everything from that point kind of is in terms of the adventure. So I'm really looking forward to cracking that open.
I love that kind of design that you get from people who are super fresh to a specific game system, because it's kind of like the designer end of the scale of when you get new players who all they know is this is a game where you get to do whatever you want. and I'll sort of translate that into mechanics as we go. And sometimes new players feel intimidated by that, but occasionally you get these people who just are like, oh, cool, so I can like approach this in any, I don't have to fight. I can, sneak around. I can communicate. I can lay a trap. I love the creativity that comes from someone who doesn't, they're not aware of the constraints that exist within a system, right? So they can just make whatever they want and worry about how it fits into the system afterwards. I love that kind of stuff. That's the juice for me.
Yep.
Or best
and
of
when
all,
you oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, or best of all, let the lead designer figure out what the mess of making it fit into the system is.
That's exactly
that's my job. That's your job.
That's exactly what I was
Delegate.
going to say. Yep. Let them create the most wonderful, bizarre thing that they can, and then you take it as the lead designer and say, all right, I need to make it this so any DM who sits down will understand how to run it, even if they're only looking at the stat block and not reading that text. So we need to make it fit. So that's where the lead designer and the developer come in, and then finally the editor to do the final pass to make sure that this wonderful creation does fit as a game mechanical element into any DM's game.
Dael, what's the first thing that you've got coming up in 2022? What's the first thing that you're excited for people to see?
I don't plan projects in advance. That's not how we operate on Monarch's Factory. No, I'm excited for, I've been getting into more streaming sort of over the second half of 2021, and I'm looking forward to having a computer that can actually like run games. That's the next like goal for me, is like have a computer that can run a game and stream at the same time. That would be great. So it's not particularly tabletop RPG related, but that's like the next step that I'm taking.
No, for sure.
I'm hyped to get into it.
But that's important. We've discussed how, technology is increasingly becoming part of the tabletop RPG hobby. So even if you are using it for playing Age of Empires, which is someone in the office's favorite video game, that's why that popped into my head.
Please, for my channel, it would be Age of Mythology.
Right, yes, that's fair. That makes more sense. It's still it's still hobby related in any case. Monster Grimoire coming Q1. Fables episode 1 is already here, and we've got the second episode dropping in February. We've also got Twisted Taverns from Runesmith coming in Q1. That was a Kickstarter from last year. That's something to get super excited about. And you can pre-order that through the Ghostfire Gaming store. Dungeons of Drakkenheim, which we had the Dungeon Dudes on a couple weeks ago to talk about Dungeons of Drakkenheim and that quest book. We've got a copy of the alpha here in the office, which I've been flicking through. Shawn, James, have you seen inside of this at all? Like, have you any context for Drakkenheim?
No. So the Dungeon Dudes, I know them because they worked on episode 6 of our current Fable, the grand finale of it all. They were, they were around for Dungeons of Drakkenheim, and the timing just worked out to get them on. But okay, so I have read a little bit of Drakkenheim, because what was there for me to see was kind of their writing test. And I looked at it and I was like, all right, hell yeah, I like what these guys have got going on. So yes, I've seen a little bit of Drakkenheim, but the grandeur of the RPG book, right? You haven't really read an RPG until you've seen it with full illo and layout. So.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And some of the illustrations in there are absolutely phenomenal as well. Shawn, have you seen it at all?
I haven't seen the final version. I met with the dudes before the Kickstarter began just to hear their pitch and see what they were going to be working on in case they had any questions for me. And, I spent at least an hour, and they went through everything. And other than a couple of very brief sort of, rules specific comments, I thought it was just the most brilliant thing I'd heard, and I was so excited that we would be doing it. And then during editing at the end, the editor, if he had a very specific game content question, would come to me and say, does this work? And I would either say yes or no, or we tweak it, or we'd go to the Dungeon Dudes if if we needed them to clarify something. So I worked on sort of bits and pieces of it, but not to the extent where I have seen the whole book.
What I love about it, and this kind of goes for Grim Hollow as well, but I think it's exciting across the hobby. You know, it's endemic of, or indicative is the word I'm looking for, of where the hobby is moving, is I don't run a lot of like adventure modules when I run D&D. I much prefer to play within what was my own campaign setting at one point. And I think that's because what Wizards of the Coast produce, just in terms of content and theme, doesn't speak to me, because it's a lot of high fantasy. Whereas Drakkenheim is like, you know, it's almost as dark fantasy as you can go without getting just, you know, utterly...
Ben likes dark fantasy?
That's the new moment in which you take a shot in these episodes, is when I mention dark fantasy. I don't know. I just want to say, like,
Ben mentions dark fantasy. Ben mentions The Witcher. Ben mentions Batman.
Dael mentions mythology. We gotta even it out.
I don't like this being turned on me.
This was only funny when it was about you. Let me come to my thesis point, I suppose, on this, is that Drakkenheim is a book that I cracked open. And it's one of the first adventure books that I've looked in, not because there's any shortcomings with any other adventure books, just because they weren't for me. And I went, I want to run that. Like, that specifically, how it is written in this book, I want to run a version of that. So I'm super excited to see the final version of it. Yeah, that's what I've got to say on that. And then, of course, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of, I feel like Drakkenheim is an excellent dark fantasy adventure for people, you know, if you've never played D&D before but love dark fantasy, I'm sure you could crack into it. But I feel like, especially because it has a couple of, I'd call them homebrew, but they're not really homebrew, they're more published brew rules in there.
I like to call homebrew mechanics like that get published small batch. They're small batch mechanics.
Small batch, that's cute. I was trying to think of, I was like, indie brew? I don't know, but no, small batch, that's so cute.
Yeah.
Adopting it officially. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, later in the year, Fables Part 1, currently out, or Fables 1, Citadel of the Unseen Sun, Chapter 1, currently out, episode 1 chapter. Anyway, the point that I'm coming to...
You got it. There's 3 tiers of this stuff.
You gotta go. We're going 3 tiers deep. All right, let's go back
Fables,
to the...
episodes, chapters beneath it. And that's what it all is. Chapters at the bottom, Fable at the top, episode in the middle.
Talk to me, James, in any tidbit you can, because it's no secret that the Fables does not finish with the 6 episodes that we've got coming as part of Citadel of the Unseen Sun. There is a second Fable coming down the line, which will start in July of this year. What can you / are you happy to talk about from that? Because I was about to say something, then I stopped myself. I was like, I don't know. I'll follow your lead. I'll follow your lead with it.
Here's what I'll say. The goal of Fables for me is to present wildly different worlds, tones, and scenarios within the fantasy milieu. The 5e fantasy mode as possible. We started here with Grim Hollow's dark fantasy because it's home base for us here at Ghostfire. What we're going to be doing next time will take you off guard. And what we're going to do the next time is going to take you off guard. And what we're going to do the next time is going to take you off guard. The reputation rules that I talked about last year with you, that will find its home in Fable 2. Oh my gosh. Somewhere in the middle of Fable 1's runtime, there will be another announcement, much like we had an announcement for Citadel back in November of 2021. Can you hear the dog that's just going wild outside my window right now?
It's going wild for Fables.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's
I'm going to start barking in a bit.
About midway through the Fables 1 run, you're going to get another big announcement for what Fable 2 is going to be. I'm not going to say anything about it other than this. Fables Citadel of the Unseen Sun is a very straightforward story. It's one of my favorite types of D&D adventure. Just like we talked about last year when I was talking about the best way to design an adventure. It's 6 very sort of open-ended episodes that connect to very specific points, right? A lot of freedom within an episode, and then it connects at a very tight location to go on to the next one. I think that Fables 2 is going to take that to a whole new degree. We're talking extremely open adventuring for this one, with episodes that will click into a very sort of open world scenario. We've got some wonderful designers working on it, whose names, if I were to say them aloud to you, would make you scream with excitement. And for the very first time, we're going to be making a brand new world, a brand new campaign setting. Grim Hollow, there was 3 books worth of material, or 2 books with a third on the way to supplement this adventure. This new one is going to take place in a setting that you've never seen from Ghostfire before. I think I would bet good money on you've never even played in this setting in another D&D game, but not 100% odds.
This is so intriguing.
I know.
What setting might I be writing for that you could have played in D&D that is OGL available to us for me to write in? Puzzle on that for a little while.
I need
get to the announcement.
I need a pinboard behind me with red string and start connecting the webs.
Yeah.
Just a photo of James pinned in the middle.
That's all I think I can say. I think I'm verging on saying too much as it is. But I'm deep in the middle of Fables 2 right now, working with the writers, starting to get illustrations back, making sure that everything is going to come together beautifully for when it launches in July. So
Wanna know?
It all in good time, my friend.
Damn it, James, we know where you live. God.
I need people who watch this or listen to this to know. I need people to know that, like, of the hosts, of the core 4 hosts, I'm often the one who's sitting here with literally no context for the internal Ghostfire stuff. It's everyone else knows bits and pieces, and I'm just here like, mysterious.
You're relatable, Dael. You're relatable to the audience.
Yeah, I'm the audience surrogate. I voice their wish to know more, their curiosity.
Well, I feel like I'm just going to push that frustration a little bit further because now moving on to Shawn, I mean, what can you not talk about that is coming in 2022? Because you're also working on a fairly large project, and this is different. This is not a Fables. Right. This is going to be quite different. And again, I was about to do a lead in, and I was like, you know what? I'll follow your lead. You tell us what we can talk about.
Okay, so Dael. I can't tell you, but we have begun working on our next Kickstarter project, and we are into the initial design stages. I'm working with a wonderful team, and like James was talking about with Fables, this is a project that I have wanted to do for years, but I never had the full complement of skills to get it done, and I never had a large enough team around me to do it. And hey, guess what? Now I do. So I am looking at a project which I will use the code name that I love to use for it, which is Dragon Rage.
I love that it has a code name. Excellent. Mm-hmm.
And my tagline for this campaign is, "You were born 30 seconds ago. Roll for initiative."
Woohoo!
So what I tried to do with this project is, rather than build a world and then make some adventures fit into it, I'm going to try to build some experiences and build the world to best capture those sort of narrative and game mechanical experiences that we want to capture with this product. So we have many D&D, third party, and Wizards of the Coast trademarked worlds out there. I want to build something that's completely different, both in terms of being a world and in being the experience that you get while playing this. So I really can't go into too much more detail than that, because there's still a lot of work to be done and a lot of talk, both with the designers and internally at Ghostfire Gaming, about how we're going to deliver this. But it's going to be something that I think you will not forget when you play your first adventure.
On
We
behalf
want to
of the
capture,
audience, we are
Yes.
intrigued.
Yeah, I want it to be apocalyptic, but the most hopeful apocalypse that you're ever going to go through as a character.
Hopeful apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's a good genre
Yeah.
name.
Yep. So that's what we're shooting for with our next project that I'm bringing to the table.
For what it's worth, you've also said, as much as I know on the project, you've done well in bringing it right up to that line where now I'm in the dark as well, beyond anything else that
Join
you've
me.
mentioned. Although all I've got in my head now is like babies with like little Viking hats with horns and like a baby with like a wizard's hat on. It's like, out into the field you go. Like baby
It's-
Looney Tunes.
Not that kind of born. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Okay, cool. Just to quickly clarify, so that is a Kickstarter that we are doing later in the year, I believe. Our next Kickstarter, or the next Forged with Ghostfire Kickstarter, is called the Sunken Isles, which is another Kickstarter from RuneSmith. Stuff has started coming out about that. I believe the Kickstarter will be happening in February. But keep an eye, it'll all be in our social media channels, so keep an eye out for the Sunken Isles. I think it is, again, a complete tone shift and much more up Logan's alley in terms of the world that he's creating there to adventure within. So really excited to learn more about the Sunken Isles. And we're also, with Blaine Simple, diversifying out of just purely 5th edition content with a card game called Fight the Blight, which is, to my understanding, I had a brief read of the rules and they're still in development. So this, like, what I'm about to describe is not the final end product, but it is a short kind of, short form card game where the idea is that everybody's turning into zombies and you have to be the last person to turn into a zombie to win the
I
game. So
love
whoever the
that.
final survivor is, and you're playing cards to both harm and help other players at the table. The trick is, the thing that I thought was really cool and clever is that if you do turn into a zombie, you're not out of the game. You're still in the game and can continue to participate. And I'm not sure whether you help hinder the other players and try to influence who the ultimate winner is, but I just liked that it had an engagement mechanic to keep people at the table the whole time. I love short card games like this. I used to play Munchkin a lot, even before I was playing 5th edition D&D. I love Avalon and Resistance and those sort of games. Are these sort of games that we enjoy playing as well? Dael, do you have like a favorite short form card game?
That was like the royal we for a minute there. I play a lot of short form card games with my friends. Like my sort of tight friendship group formed from playing board games, and then slowly over time it has transitioned more and more towards shorter card games, just because it's harder to find time. You can play more of them. You can mix up the game that you're playing if you switch these things up. But it's also, interestingly to me, is a zone where even my friends who don't think of themselves as being into game design at all, they accidentally get into it through these short form card games, because it's usually really easy to just swap out rules and stuff. So one that we play a lot is a card game called Super Fight, where you have cards that are characters like, I don't know, Rambo or Pikachu, I don't know, and then you give them a weapon, and then you pit your fighter against other people's fighters. And we'd played that a lot of times, and then finally one day one of my friends was like, what if we play Super Fight, but instead of it being Super Fight, there's another game called Red Flags, where you have to make the most ideal date for another person in the circle. So we were like, let's play Super Fight, but it's Red Flags. And you're dating the warrior, and you also, if it comes to a tiebreaker, you have to make their roommate. So it's like a matter of like, okay, but you can give them a really annoying roommate to try to make them less appealing. It's just one of those things where with these little card games, you can really start to just muck around and have fun because you get really familiar with the rules really quickly.
Yeah. That is the best name for what that card game is. I had to think about it for a second. I was like, red flag. Like I was thinking like country flags or something for a second. And I was like, that's amazing.
Because you try to make an appealing date for the person who's judging, and other people add cards to your person to make them less appealing. They add red flags.
So heaps happening with Ghostfire in 2022. We've got a whole slate of projects, as we've just discussed, that are coming out over the course of the year. So heaps to be excited by. But what I want to know, kind of similar to my question at the start of the episode, is what are you, and while I'm very excited for the listener to answer, leave a comment down below. I actually, by you, I mean you, Dael, Shawn, James. What are you excited about for 2022? What is I'd say like hobby goal, but I realize that could also be like professional goal within the context of this conversation. So I'll see if we can split those two between each other. I mean, James and Shawn, we've already gone over a bit of like what you might be shooting for in 2022. But James, if you had like a hobby goal that you want to do, something that you want to do really for yourself in 2022, what would that be?
You're right. There's no way to fully separate this from professional goal. But what I'd like to do, regardless of any professional implications, is make an indie RPG. Make an RPG that I've written from the ground up.
I would love to see what you would do with that.
I've existed in the D&D space for my whole RPG career, which has been going on since I was in college. And I love D&D, and I'm glad I get to stay within 5e while I'm working on Fables and all of that. But I would love to just play around with ideas that D&D doesn't quite have the elbow room to handle, or new conflict resolution mechanics rather than rolling a d20. How can you make a combat system that's really fast and snappy and thoughtful and creative, but that doesn't have 5-foot grid chessboard movement?
Sure.
There are so many interesting game ideas out there that D&D isn't equipped to handle. Even though I love D&D, that just isn't equipped to handle. And I want to explore that.
Is there something specific, like is it within the same genre you want to continue to swim within fantasy? Because you mentioned combat, or are you looking to do something, or do you not know, like it could be anything, whatever takes your fancy?
All of my favorite games have an element of fantasy to them, whether they're video games or role-playing games. And that fantasy doesn't necessarily need to be sword and sorcery. Like I'm a big fan of Pokemon, and that isn't medieval fantasy necessarily, but it's definitely fantastical. Even if you look at something like Persona, that has huge fantasy elements, but it takes place in a modern day setting, stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely fantasy, absolutely big and magical, but probably not in the same sort of dwarves and elves high fantasy that D&D works in.
Still dice, or you think you might experiment? Because I know that a lot of games that try to get away from that D20 mechanic try to get into things like coins, or they use cards to like recreate, the semblance of luck, or the presence of luck is the word that I'm searching for within a game.
Yeah. So if I were to move away from dice, cards would be the way I would go. Okay. And if I were to stick with dice, D20 would be the way I would go. Because the D20 is just such a good die, even though it has some mechanical implications of its own that I think a lot of big RPG nerds love to talk about. It's got a flat distribution, 5% across all its values, whereas say 3d6 offers a similar range of values, but it operates on a bell curve. Stuff like that,
right?
Where your highest roll and lowest roll of 3 and 18 are like sub 1% odds, whereas a nat 1 and nat 20 are always 5%.
It's also just so much easier in terms of doing probability maths as the not maths person. It's much easier to work out that stuff with a D20 system than with something like cards, for example. I messed around with cards as my sort of core mechanic for a Western indie game I made in a month once, and trying to do the maths of that was a nightmare.
I'm interested in RPGs that don't have nearly as much random chance as well.
Yeah.
If you were to take a deck of cards, there would be random chance of what cards you could draw, which is there. But one thing that I'm toying around with in my mind, I was working on this game idea literally right before we started calling for this podcast. So that just goes to show you. But like, what if you couldn't miss an attack? What if all your attacks just hit, and there was some other element at play that made it dynamic rather than I'm going to stack to hit bonuses, or I'm going to do some move that makes me more likely to hit or something? How can you get more interesting in your tactics than hit or miss? I think that's a really fun space to play around with.
Yeah, I agree completely, especially because like that element of chance, and we talked about it a little bit in a previous episode where it was like, you know, what does a critical hit mean? Is that representative of skill or not, depending on the critical hit window? And I think that there's a frustration with random chance games because often you completely miss an attack that should have been like a guaranteed thing, or you are never missing. And, you know, as a dungeon master, that can be frustrating when you have this grand monster and you're like, no, they'll never miss it. They're just constantly hitting it because of their modifiers. I think that I've never played Gloomhaven before, but I know that it uses cards as well. And I don't know if you're randomly drawing them or equipping yourself with them at the start of like a round and then spending them. So it's almost more like a spending system than a random chance system. I don't know. I'm just workshopping your game for you now. I have no idea if that's along the lines of what you're thinking, but
yeah, Gloomhaven, you select the cards that you're going to play, 2 cards at the beginning of your turn, but the cards, the deck that you get to deal with is dwindling as you play.
Sure.
And the strategy that you think you're going to employ at the start of the round may change completely based on the monsters or the other players' actions. So it's an interesting game. It can get very frustrating if you're used to always doing the optimal thing, because there may not be an optimal thing to do when your turn arrives.
Sure.
All of these ideas sound like they're just sort of brushing shoulders with stuff that I'm thinking about right now. I'd be very interested to, you know, in a couple of months, throw a very plain looking PDF out to the Eldritch Lorecast community and saying, okay, what do you think?
Heck yeah. I'm so excited to see what you come up with.
Mm-hmm.
We can play test it here.
Exactly.
Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah. Shawn, what about you? You know, obviously, again, it will probably bleed over into your professional life, but is there like a hobby goal? Is there something that you want to accomplish for you in 2022?
Yeah, my one goal is always play more games.
Sure.
For so many reasons. Another goal is, who can you help make their way in this industry? Because I had so many people helping me that one of my goals is always to help people achieve their own goals and their own dreams. But the thing I really want to do is get back to like blogging again, because I learn what I've learned by writing it down. Talking about it's fine, but it's sometimes too spontaneous and I get off on tangents or I get a little silly. When I sit down to write a blog, I actually have to think about what I think about. And I did a series for D&D Beyond that James was kind enough to make actually work for me on how to design an adventure, D&D adventure. And
it was an awesome series.
It was one of my favorite things to do in the last few years, because it got such great feedback and great responses and great discussion going with people who, you know, just wanted to learn how, or wanted to get better at, or wanted to tell me how wrong I was about how to write adventures, which was fine as well, because I learned something along the way. So just keep interacting in a variety of ways with the community and with the hobby.
Yeah, for sure. Dael, what about you?
I have several lists. Okay, here we go. I
What are
think
you
that-
trying to sell this year?
Yeah. As much as I can, Ben. As much as I can.
Perfect.
So I have two lists. One of them I was saying just before we started recording. Last year sometime was having a conversation with Trent from Miscast, and he just said, "What are your big goals?" And I was like, "I don't have any." So I tried to write a list. So I've got that one. These, by the way, I think the easiest way to keep your hobbies and your work goals separate is by having, apparently most of your goals have nothing to do with your work life. That's fun. Apparently I want to make another scripted content thing for my channel. I made one called Wolfgang once upon a time, and I think it'd be fun to do that again. So I have some ideas for that. That would be fun. I want to do more streaming, of course. That's one that I mentioned just before. I have an indie game that I've been sort of toying with on the side. It's not breaking new ground by any means, but you know, it's something that I've wanted to and have been fiddling with creating for a very long time. And it would be nice to get that to a playable stage, you know? That could be fun. On this other list that I just found on my phone, I would like to learn how to sew.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great hobby.
It's a wonderful goal.
Yeah.
It's something that when we went into lockdown the first time around, one of my friends and I were lamenting. We were like, why can't we sew? Why can't we tailor clothes? Why didn't we use lockdown to learn how to do that? So I'd like to learn how to sew. I am starting the process of and would like to continue learning how to code in Python. Okay. I think that's fun. I sporadically have ideas that I'm like, if only I knew anything about coding, I would be able to do this. And so, let's learn to code, Dael. That might be good. And then also on the list is skateboarding. I would like to learn how to ride in general and also how to do 2 small tricks. That's my list.
Cute.
I like how specific yet non-specific that last bit is. Do you have like specific tricks in mind that you want to learn? Okay.
Whatever is easiest.
Fair enough.
Staying upright is quite a trick.
Yeah, a friend once tried to teach me how to ollie and it didn't go well. So I don't think that I need to really keep it like low expectations, but I would like to learn to skateboard and to do 2 small tricks.
That's how, well, I mean, it's important to have like success states, in your goals rather than just having goals.
You got to set specific and achievable goals. This is important.
That's
when you
true.
set goals for yourself, don't say, I want to be rich or, I want to have 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, right? You have to make it things that you personally on your own can achieve, that you have control over. You don't have control over whether 10,000 people subscribe to your YouTube channel, but you can say, I would like to upload once every week,
Yeah, sure. That's really good advice, actually.
Yeah, it's great advice from Dael, who answered what are your goals in the hobby question with sewing, skateboarding. I would like to, yeah.
But those are, those are hobbies, right? Like, I didn't necessarily mean that to have to mean,
exactly.
D&D
You
or
didn't
5e
specify,
or anything like
and
that.
I took advantage.
Exactly.
That actually brings a new goal for me, which is to start the Dael Kingsmill Let's Buy a Helmet Fund. So we should start that.
Yeah, I'm gonna need all the pads, elbow pads, wrist pads, and I need all of them.
Just bubble wrap. We'll just send you like a massive thing of bubble wrap and tape, and you can just tape it all to yourself. It'll be perfect. No, I think that's important to note, because when I was thinking of this question, when I was writing for the episode, I was like, what are my goals? And the one thing that I definitely want to do next year for myself is play more 5th edition D&D for myself.
Oh yeah.
Because it's a game that I fell in love with really hard, played the hell out of it for about 1.5 years, 2 years with a group of friends. Every week I'd show up. I ran sessions for 2 people sometimes if the whole group couldn't make it. I really don't think I missed a week for maybe 2.5 or 1.5 years. And then fell into it professionally and started running it for clients. And that evolved over the course of a period of time to a point where I was not enjoying the game as much anymore because I was not running it for myself. I was running it for other people. I've talked a lot about how I've run the same thing over and over and over again. I haven't run a new adventure in a very long time because it's when you're running games, 3, 4, 5 games a week, it's expeditious to just run the same thing that you already know so that you know what's in the different rooms and what the ability checks are and who the NPCs are, like, the back of your hand. And it's become a bit stale for me. And it was funny recording this podcast with Shawn and James in particular, saying the more, I can't remember if you said this on air or it was just a thing that you said off air, but those that are involved in the industry play the game less because they have less time to, they're involved in the game so much during their downtime, they're often not playing the game. So I think what I'd like to do is play it more for myself. But how that relates to what you were saying, Dael, is I hadn't set like personal specific goals. And I think you're right. It's like do 4 sessions, invent, a handful of new NPCs that can be inserted into a world, design a new monster.
For my wisdom.
I am here to absorb, and that is all.
But no, that's exactly right. And I think you see the same thing in YouTube as well as an industry, is that the more you get into, YouTube as a job, the less you find yourself watching YouTube.
Sure.
Which is, a blessing and a curse because you get to have a little bit of a break from it for a little bit, but you also aren't taking in that sort of the fun, the inspiration that makes you want to make YouTube.
Yeah.
I feel like so many people started because they saw someone who was a creator that they loved and they thought, I want to do that as well. And so when you cut yourself off from that, you do end up in this odd little shriveled position. So no, I think it's a great idea to make one of your goals playing, but like for fun.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that extends to, there's that old adage, do something that you love and you'll never work a day in your life because nobody's hiring. But thank you, Shawn. It's still work. Like, it still becomes work. Any task that you are putting a lot of effort into, you may still love what you're doing, but I've just become super aware over the last sort of 12 to 18 months of making sure that, I'm sure, and James, I don't want to speak for you, so please speak for yourself in a moment, but, writing Fables and being part of that project, you got to invest so much of your creativity and enjoyment and what you thought was cool into that. But it was still hard work, you still had to meet deadlines. You still had to make sure what you're producing is quality and kill your darlings and all that sort of thing. It's very important, I think, to recognize when something should just be for you and doesn't have to be economized for, somebody else or for an audience or whatever.
You're dead right, Ben. I run one D&D game every week. We've been off for a little while because everyone's busy, but I make sure that the ideas which I make for that game, I'm not plundering from something I'm writing, and I'm making them specifically for that game. If one of those ideas sparks a similar idea that makes it into something I'm working on, that's fair game. I'm not going to, try and shutter my creativity because of it, but like, If I get to really mixing the two streams, then I am going to lose the freedom and play of the game I'm doing as a hobby, and it will be contaminated by the work, and the work is still fun, but it's different. It's different, and they don't play well together, in my opinion.
Something interesting that you just said, or interesting to me at least, is that idea of play, right? Like, all of us to some degree are in an odd position because our work is play. Like, we work in games. and that's this really bizarre thing where work requires a certain amount of structure and responsibility and, organization, whereas the game itself that we're trying to sort of come to at the end of it is all about play. And like, I don't believe there are any hard lines in this world, but like, where does it start to fade from play into work? And can you have something be work and play at the same time?
Dael, remind me, you studied theater in college, right?
I did, yes.
Okay, cool. Only an actor would talk about play like that. I know exactly what you're talking about. No, you're dead right too.
Yeah, and there's always a risk on when you study something in depth, whether it's acting or writing or whatever you're building, whatever you're creating, art, that you have to look at it in a different way because of the study that you take. So if you love novels and then you go to writing school and you decide you're going to write a novel and you write 13 novels and none of them sell, it can dishearten you. It can bring a different focus to the fun that you have in that hobby. And I think, that's sort of what we're talking about here. So you have to come at it, be okay with coming at it from a different way and train yourself to absorb and go through these processes in ways that are fulfilling to you, even if that focus changes.
Yeah, and I suppose because it didn't occur to me in the moment that I was talking about it, but you teach games, like it has that academic quality as well, and
right.
It's so fast. And I suppose my first foray into game design, I guess, was or any kind of formal game design was I ended up with a minor in digital media at university because there was a game on there was a class on game design, and that was the first one that I took that we talked about these sort of central loops and the sort of dividing up of game design into studyable segments and Huizinga's magic circle and all these things, and there's that idea as well, isn't there, of gamification of things that aren't play. So maybe, like, here I am talking about, does play become work? But is there a way to make work play as well?
Possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
In every job there is to do, in every job that's to be done, there is an element of fun. You find the fun and snap, the job's a game.
I bounced the ball 5 times in a minute. How many times?
Did we just go full Mary Poppins there?
We went full Mary Poppins.
Okay, I just had to ask. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not to say that, speaking for myself, the enjoyment of working with games is not fun. Like, it absolutely is, for sure. But I just guess appreciating that separation is important. Find the play. That was the phrase I was always told.
And you have to hang on to that because that's what you're trying to invoke in others.
Yeah,
you're trying to invoke that sense of fun. And if you lose it, then it's hard to entice others to find the fun in your own work. So yes, you must keep it.
2022, all about doing things for yourself. That's the slogan. That's what I'm going with. That's the thesis statement. Treat yourself. Do things for yourself.
Yeah.
Speaking of treating each other, that was a weird sentence. I'm going to start it again. Speaking of treats, I don't know. Speaking of things, bad segueing into the end of the episode because we are totally out of time. I was going to say the Eldritch Lorecast 2022. Here we come. We are going to be here every week. So spread the word in your local tavern. Get down and tell the villagers, the NPCs in your life. That sounded mean. Tell the people that you love and care about in your life about the Eldritch Lorecast. Fables, Chapter 1. Episode 1, Chapter 1, but the whole episode, in fact, I got it right this time in a roundabout way, is out now, so go check it out on the Ghostfire Gaming website, ghostfiregaming.com. If you want to keep the conversation going, our Twitter handles are just below our names. You can reach out to us there. What are you going to treat yourself with? Or what are you going to do for yourself in 2022? What's one of your New Year's resolutions? And you can also email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. If you are not listening to this or watching this on YouTube, reach out to us there as well. I've been Ben Byrne here with James Hake, Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, and until next week, goodbye.